Have you ever walked into a room full of people from your past and felt your entire body tremble, not from fear, but from the weight of old memories? That's exactly where I was, and I didn't know the night would end with icy water on my dress, a heartbreak renewed, and a decision that would change everything. The gymnasium turned ballroom pulsed with a strange blend of nostalgia and anticipation. Balloons floated above heads, banners hung with names of old classes, and the DJ spun tracks we'd once danced to at school festivals. It smelled of perfume, polished floors, and faintly of the cafeteria food we used to complain about. For weeks, I had debated whether to come. Part of me had moved on from those hallways long ago, but another part, a quieter, stubborn part, wanted to prove to myself that I could walk in tall, unshaken. My heels clicked softly as I crossed the entrance, taking in the familiar yet foreign scene. I had chosen a deep navy dress, tailored yet modest, one that whispered success without screaming it. 10 years had passed since graduation. In that time I had built my own design studio from scratch, taken on freelance projects until my hands cramped, and eventually landed clients big enough to hire staff. I was proud of it, but I never flaunted it. Tonight, though, I hoped a little of that pride would shield me from the ghosts in this room. At first, it worked. Old classmates waved, some hugged me warmly. We exchanged stories about jobs, marriages, kids. It was awkward but harmless, the way reunions often are. But then my eyes drifted across the room and locked on a silhouette that made my breath stop. Asher. Even from a distance, I knew it was him, the slope of his shoulders, the way he tilted his head when someone spoke. Memories hit me like a sudden gust. Sitting with him at the library, his fingers brushing mine as he passed me notes, late afternoons under the bleachers where he sketched his dreams and made me believe I was part of them. We had been inseparable once. Until Nadia, and there she was too. Nadia's presence was as unmistakable as a sharp perfume. Her hair, once in a simple ponytail, now framed her face in glossy waves. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her like a statement of victory. She had been his first crush, my rival, and the quiet saboteur of our relationship. Even now, years later, just seeing her brought back the sting of whispered rumors and stolen chances. I steadied my breath and reminded myself I wasn't that timid girl anymore. I'd come here as a woman who had survived heartbreak, learned her worth, and carved a place in the world. Yet, when Asher's eyes met mine across the crowd, my heart skipped like a faulty record. He smiled, tentative, unsure, and lifted his hand in a small wave. I forced a polite smile back and turned to the drink table, hoping distance would keep my composure intact. But Nadia didn't believe in distance. Her heels were sharp staccato notes on the floor as she approached, her glass of water glinting under the chandelier. "Well, if it isn't Maya," she said, her voice sugary but laced with vinegar. "You look different, still trying to impress people." I took a slow sip from my glass. "Hello, Nadia, you look the same, still trying to provoke people." Her lips curled. "Oh, I don't need to try. Some people are just easily provoked." I wanted to walk away. I wanted to be the bigger person. But before I could take a step, she tilted the glass in her hand. In one swift motion, icy water cascaded down my dress, soaking the fabric, chilling my skin. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. For a second, everything went silent except for the rush of water dripping to the floor. I stood frozen, the humiliation burning hotter than the cold. My mind flashed back to another night years ago when she'd cornered me with words instead of water, whispering lies into Asher's ears, turning him against me. And here we were again, like history repeating itself in a cruel parody. Asher's voice cut through the murmurs. "Nadia, what are you doing?" He stepped forward, his hand on her shoulder. But instead of defending me, he turned to me with a look I couldn't decipher. "Maybe just let it go, Maya. Tonight isn't the night for old grudges." His words hit harder than the water. He was shielding her. Again, I blinked back tears, my hands trembling. "Of course," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Tonight isn't the night." I turned and walked out, the crowd parting like water around a sinking ship. In the parking lot, the night air hit me in the face, cool and sharp. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. My reflection stared back from the rearview mirror, mascara smudged, dress clinging, eyes burning. I had promised myself I wouldn't let them see me break. But here I was, feeling 15 again, powerless and small. I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly. 1, 2, 3, each breath steadier than the last. This was not the end of my story. This was a moment, a humiliating, infuriating moment, yes, but not the definition of who I was. I thought of my studio, the sketches piled on my desk, the young interns who looked to me for guidance. I thought of the nights I had worked until dawn, the contracts I'd fought to win, the times I'd almost given up but didn't. I had built something real, something Nadia could never pour water on. As the engine hummed to life, I felt a strange calm settling over me, like steel hardening under heat. They might see me as weak, but I would show them strength. Not through shouting or revenge, but through becoming everything they thought I couldn't be. That night at home, I stripped off the soaked dress and stood under a hot shower until the last traces of cold left my skin. Then I sat at my desk and opened a new sketchpad. My hands moved on instinct, lines flowing into shapes, shapes into ideas. By the time the sun rose, I had a new concept for a collection, bolder, more daring than anything I'd done before. I named it, Rebirth. Over the following months, rebirth consumed me. I worked like a woman possessed, pouring every drop of pain and resolve into fabric and form. My small studio began to attract bigger clients. Fashion blogs wrote about the mysterious young designer with fire in her stitches. Photos of my work appeared in magazines. I didn't post about it, didn't tag anyone. Success was my silent answer to that night. But late at night, when the city's hum softened and my hands finally stilled, I still thought about Asher. About the way his eyes had flickered with something, regret, confusion, when he'd told me to let it go. I wondered if he had truly believed Nadia back then, or if he had chosen the simpler story because it hurt less. Sometimes I replayed the old memories, trying to find the moment when everything broke. The day I didn't show up at the park because I'd found out about Nadia's lies. The evening I left town without telling him the truth, convinced he wouldn't believe me. If I'd been braver then, would it have changed anything? And yet, even in those thoughts, a new feeling began to grow, not forgiveness, not yet, but a kind of clarity. What Nadia had done was cruel. What Asher had done was weak. But neither defined me now. The girl who once trembled in the face of humiliation had built a life on her own terms. I didn't know then that fate was weaving its quiet threads, that months later my path would cross theirs again in a way I could never have predicted. All I knew was that night at the reunion, drenched and heartbroken, something inside me shifted. It was the start of a new chapter I hadn't planned, one that would test me but also free me. As I drifted to sleep in the early light of morning, the sketches of rebirth scattered on my desk, I whispered to myself, this isn't the end. This is where I begin again. What would you do if the very people who humiliated you suddenly stood in front of you needing your help, and you held all the power to choose who you'd be? That's exactly where I found myself months after that reunion. 6 months passed like a slow, deliberate season of growth. My studio's collection, Rebirth, had taken on a life of its own. What started as sketches in the haze of a humiliating night became a fully realized line of clothing that resonated with people far beyond my circle. Orders poured in, articles were written, invitations arrived from events I had only ever dreamed of attending. But I kept my head down, still wary of being seen, still healing from the sting of that reunion. When an email arrived from the city's cultural council inviting me to design the interior and theme for an upcoming charity gala, I almost deleted it. The event was prestigious, hosted by the city's oldest families, covered by every lifestyle magazine. It would be the kind of night where power gathered in glittering gowns and dark suits. My name would be on the program. I would have to stand in that spotlight. Part of me shrank from it. Part of me longed for it. In the end, I said yes. The weeks leading up to the gala were a blur of color palettes, lighting designs, and late-night phone calls with vendors. I poured my energy into every detail. The silk drapes that would ripple like water, the floral installations that would bloom under hidden lights, the stage where speeches would be given. For me, it wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about building a space that felt alive, something guests would walk into and feel transformed by. The night of the gala arrived with a quiet rain misting the city. My team was already on site by the time I stepped into the grand hall. The transformation was breathtaking even to me. Golden chandeliers shimmering like stars, tables draped in ivory linen, soft music curling through the air. I moved between the arrangements, adjusting candles, checking sightlines, smoothing invisible wrinkles. It was my world for the night. And then, across the vast room, I saw them. Asher and Nadia had arrived together. He looked different, the youthful glow dimmed, his suit slightly rumpled, his smile forced. She, though still striking, carried a tension around her mouth, a flicker of unease in her eyes. They were guests now, not monarchs of some high school kingdom. But seeing them sent a tremor through my hands. I told myself I was ready, that they were just two faces among hundreds. Still, my heart quickened. I focused on my work, instructing a waiter to shift a centerpiece, kneeling to fix a cable near the stage. Out of the corner of my eye, I could feel Asher's gaze flicker toward me and away again. But neither of them approached. The night unfolded. Guests arrived, speeches began, glasses clinked. For a while, it was just another event. Until the commotion. I heard it before I saw it. A sharp cry, the clatter of a chair. People turned. Nadia was on the floor near the entrance, one heel twisted beneath her, her ankle bent at an odd angle. She had tripped on a loose edge of carpet I had been meaning to tape down. Guests stood around her uncertainly, some murmuring, some pulling out phones. Without thinking, I moved. My knees hit the polished floor as I knelt beside her. "Don't try to stand," I said, my voice steady, professional. "We'll get ice." Someone called a on-site medic. Her eyes widened when she realized who I was. "Maya," she whispered, her voice cracking with something that wasn't just pain. Why are you helping me?" I wrapped my scarf gently around her ankle to stabilize it. "Because you're hurt," I said simply. "And because that's what people do when someone's hurt." Asher pushed through the crowd then, his face pale, his tie askew. "Nadia." He crouched opposite me, but his eyes locked onto mine. And in them, I saw not arrogance or dismissal but a kind of raw recognition. "I didn't know," he said softly, almost to himself. "All those years, I thought you left because you stopped loving me. Nadia told me things I believed." His voice cracked. I was wrong. I kept my focus on the ankle, checking for swelling. "We all believed things," I said, my tone even. "But some wounds don't heal just because you're sorry." The medic arrived, lifting Nadia gently into a wheelchair. The crowd began to disperse, murmurs fading into the background. For a moment, it was just Asher and me standing in the glow of the chandeliers, the space between us filled with years of silence. Later, after the gala's main program ended and most guests had gone, I found a quiet spot on the balcony, looking out at the city glistening under rain. My hands were still trembling from adrenaline. I didn't hear him approach until he spoke. "You saved her," Asher said quietly. "Even after what she did. You're stronger than both of us." I kept my eyes on the skyline. "Strength isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about choosing who you want to be, no matter what they chose." He stepped closer, but not too close. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "But I hope someday you'll believe I never stopped caring." I turned to look at him fully for the first time that night. His face was older, more lined, but in his eyes there was the boy who used to draw futures with me under the bleachers. For a heartbeat, the old ache rose, but it no longer held me. "Maybe someday," I said, and turned back to the city lights. He nodded slowly, as if accepting a verdict. "She's been, not well," he murmured. "All these years. And I thought protecting her was the right thing. I thought it was what good men did. I didn't see what it cost." I listened, but said nothing. Some truths belong to him now, not to me. When I returned to my studio a few days later, a small envelope was waiting on my desk. Inside was a handwritten note from Nadia. Her handwriting was different than I remembered, softer. She wrote that she was sorry, not just for the water but for the years of small cruelties, the rumors, the sabotage. She wrote that she was starting therapy, trying to rebuild her life. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just wanted to say she knew what she had done. I sat for a long time with that note in my hands, feeling a mixture of emotions I couldn't name. It wasn't exoneration. It wasn't closure. But it was something. As for Asher, I never saw him with Nadia in public again. There were whispers that he'd stepped back from certain business ventures, that he was reevaluating his life. But I didn't wait for him. My life moved forward, new projects, travel, friendships that nourished me. The rebirth collection led to another, then another. People started asking me to speak at conferences about resilience, creativity, and self-worth. One evening, months after the gala, I stood backstage at an auditorium about to give a talk. My slides were ready. My hands were steady. I looked at the audience through the curtain. Rows of faces, some young, some older, all waiting. I thought about that reunion night, the icy water, the humiliation, the resolve. And I realized the real twist of fate wasn't revenge or regret. It was realizing that I didn't need either of them, not Asher's love, not Nadia's apology, to complete my story. My strength wasn't born from what they did to me but from what I chose to do after. That's the message I carry now, and the one I shared with that audience that night. Your story isn't over at the moment of pain. It begins when you decide how to rise. I told them about the girl at the reunion, humiliated and drenched. I told them about the collection that came from that moment. And I told them about the night at the gala when I knelt to help someone who had tried to destroy me. The room was silent. Then people started to stand, clapping slowly at first, then with a force that filled the hall. I felt tears prick my eyes, but this time they were warm, not bitter. Somewhere in the audience, maybe Asher was listening. Maybe not. It didn't matter. This was my life now, my story, my stage, my voice. And that was the fate none of them had seen coming.